the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Greetings and welcome to this episode of AVNation TV's Connected. I'm your host, David Danto, and I'm here with a couple of stellar individuals that follow the technology industry and the collaboration and communications industry. I would like them to introduce themselves. Steve, why don't you go first and give us your name and tell everybody what you do?
Yeah, hi, Steve Koenig. I'm the Vice President of Research at Consumer Technology Association. David, it's great to be with you again.
Thank you very much, Steve. And Carolina, your turn.
Carolina Milanese. I'm an analyst at Creative Strategies and the founder of The Heart Attack. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, both of you, for joining me. So, this is a year like no other. You have to, if you don't laugh about it, you'll cry. And I'm going to try and keep everything lighthearted. But, a global pandemic, horrific, illnesses and death across the globe. We're not going to focus on that because we're not health experts. But we are, following the technology space. And this is the time of year that we would normally be sitting down at pre-CES events and listening to Steve, you and your team talk about trends and what's going on. And clearly the trends are going to be impacted by this global situation in the short run and probably in the long run. Why don't you give us your perspective on where you think that's going, Steve?
Sure. Well, actually, we've seen a historically strong demand for consumer technology throughout this season. And really, that began at the headwaters of the crisis early this year, with the sudden collision of home, work, and school and households across America and really worldwide, to be honest, really endeavored to cope with that situation. And from there, I think what we've witnessed in the business world has really been two words: digital transformation. And this has been amazing to see how retail has been transformed, really a lot of different sectors across the economy, digitally transforming in a variety of ways. I think retail obviously moving almost completely to online, and we've seen that. But a lot of businesses and the usual suspects of our daily lives these days, a lot of video calls, like this one, webinars and so forth. And thank goodness we've had these digital tools. But that quotient of demand has remained strong throughout the year and is actually spilling over into the holiday season. And we think that's just going to continue right on into 2021. And really, we're witnessing, they call it the Great Reset, but technology is at the core of this. And we've seen some amazing innovation, just organic innovation. We've also seen a lot of technologies deployed for new use cases, again, to cope with the crisis. I mean, telemedicine is a great example of this, and digital health overall. But new applications for AI, robotic process automation, natural language processing, obviously all of this happening in the cloud. That's what I mean when I'm talking about digital transformation. And that's been in the corporate world and business space, but also under each and every American roof. And we've seen that with all the enthusiasm for smart home technologies and emerging categories like healthy home technologies, robotic vacuums, smart air sanitizers and purifiers and so forth. So a lot of opportunity, again, spilling over into holiday and carrying forward into the new year.
Has there been an impact with so many people, unfortunately dealing with, unemployment issues? Has that had a dent in the buying, or do we see that as not really being very impactful, for the majority of the resellers?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, and certainly there's been no shortage of economic hardship. And there was a lot of debate and discussion when we had the first stimulus check and what that was going to do to literally stimulate spending and so forth. And actually, there was some interesting data from the Fed that showed that the majority of those dollars actually went to savings and paying down debt. Only about roughly, say, 20 to 30% went towards consumption. I think for tech, certainly there's a lot of economic hardship out there, but what we've seen is this dynamic of freed up discretionary income, less travel, less spending on, say, apparel. There's not a lot of compelling reasons to buy a new suit, for example, these days. Also less spending on fuel and a variety of other things that might be under normal circumstances. What we've seen is a lot of those dollars flowing into tech. People spending more time at home, looking around the house, like what can we upgrade? let's add a display. Family movie night's great, but maybe not every night around the flagship display. So let's get a couple of more TVs so people can watch different things. Obviously, more laptops and all these things. But as we're working, we're at school, everybody's at home doing their thing, and technology's at the center. So really, it's that discretionary income that's been freed up that I think where tech has really been the beneficiary of that. Other sectors too, though, across the economy have, like home improvement, and also appliance sales. This is another sector that I think has benefited from that dynamic of freed up discretionary spending.
A lot of people have taken their vacation planning and their vacation money and put it into making home improvements and doing other things that are around. So yeah, I've seen a little bit of that as well. Carolina, do you see an impact on the space? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say is interesting because it's very similar trends both in the enterprise and in the consumer space, where that initial concern of lack of funds to upgrade your PCs or your technology actually didn't quite pan out in the way that people expected because of this transferring of budget that you had. Because in an enterprise context, if you think about the lack of travel is usually the highest spent within enterprise, and all that money has gone into something else. And budget for 2021 is not going up for a lot of companies that are not planning to get people, back on planes and traveling. And it's the same in consumer. Think about people that gave up membership at the gym because they couldn't go for a long time because of lockdown, or they might felt uncomfortable going back when the gym reopened, and that going and funding Peloton or other equipment that you're using within the home, and you make available not just to the adults in the home, but to kids as well who don't have PE classes in the old-fashioned way anymore.
Yeah, I can imagine. It certainly has. It's difficult with all the changes that I certainly agree with. It's difficult to understand which ones will stick and which ones won't. And I don't know if there's any research that either one of you have seen. Yes, nobody's traveling now, so the travel industry is decimated and we're all at home. But companies that are looking at their bottom line that used to attend all these big conferences and didn't have an impact, are they going to be as interested in spending the money to exhibit in the future? Are they going to be as interested in sending as many people to these shows? I mean, these are a lot of unknowns that we don't know that are impacting the space. I don't know if either of you have a comment about that. We're really not talking about trade shows this time, but that is something that we need to consider: is these dollars that have been shifted, will they ever shift back?
I certainly think that they will, and I think the irony in this season is that once contagions contained, the crisis is over. I think the importance of in-person events, and this is everything from live concerts to trade shows, really is stronger than ever before. I mean, what we've proven in this season that we can get the job done, and we've been leading kind of the hashtag screen life, just basically a daisy chain from one screen to the other. That's helped us maintain connections with business partners, with family. We've gotten work done, and that's been great. But I think there's a lot of pent-up demand to get back out there, really, whether it's going to the movies again, or going to a concert, or going to a trade show like CES and countless others. So that's what I think is going to happen once contagion's contained. But there are a number of behaviors on the consumer front that are also going to stay in place. And as I said before, this digital transformation is one thing, but also the pandemic is they call it the Great Reset. It's reshaping commerce and culture in a variety of ways. And I think what that looks like from a consumer point of view is a number of these new tricks that we've picked up, like with contactless delivery is one example, curbside pickup. These are things that are going to remain in place. They're here now for health safety reasons, but they're going to stick around for convenience reasons because consumers really like convenience. Nobody wants to spend more time waiting in line or having problems at the checkout counter. So I think that's going to just become a baked-in table stake strategy for retail is just one example moving forward. And then there's a host of other things that I think are going to remain in place even as we engage and re-engage with old behaviors, old habits. We return to those things, and we look forward to doing that, like hopping on a plane and taking a vacation or even just a business trip.
I tend to agree with Steve, but I do think that there's what is going to be different is the expectations that we have, both when we attend a show or when we engage with technology. I think that consumers and business people have come to expect different things from both technology and events. And so, yes, I totally agree. We want that, human to human connection. Networking is one of the biggest reasons why we attend these big events. And it's hard to replicate that on digital. But at the same time, if I decide to attend, I want more than I wanted before, right? Because now I know that I don't have to. And I doubt that all these events will only go back to being physical events. There's going to be at least a transition period where you will have both physical and digital engagement. And it used to be like that before with keynotes and things like that, right? And on the consumer side, from a technology perspective, one of the biggest kind of set of questions that I got this year as we were, getting to the end of the year with all the launches of the really expensive smartphones is, well, will consumers still spend that kind of money? My answer was yes, but they want more. And so, it is justifying more the investment that you're making and keeping brands at a higher standard as far as the value per money that I spend and invest in a technology. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, Carolina, you're right. You're right. And it's a great point. I think one of the permanent changes with all kinds of live events, whether, again, it's a concert or a trade show, is this combination of in-person or live and plus virtual. And ostensibly, that helps increase audience engagement a lot more. But to your point, I think maybe for the physical side of that event structure, we won't see just a return back to kind of how it was before. Instead, again, to your point, I think maybe we'll see a double down on networking activities, because that is at the end of the day why a lot of people attend these events, certainly from a professional event standpoint, is to network. And as you said, these virtual events are dimensionally flat. There's not a lot of opportunity for that. But for other like concerts and other events, live events out there, it's going to introduce new business models, new opportunities for monetization through sponsorships and so forth, because you have this duality now of
Yep.
live and then virtual, and that's going to just remain in place as we move forward.
Well, let's actually use this as an opportunity to coin what I believe is going to be the next big buzzword in our industry. Maybe if we look at January 2022, we're looking for the buzzwords. We've obviously entered the hybrid future. Hybrid is going to be a very big deal of what's going on. And there are a bunch of facets to that we can talk about just for a couple of minutes. This concept of hybrid working, there've been so many stigmas around the lazy remote worker over the course of the last 5 or 10 years, where, famous names and famous companies, I don't need to list them, talking about bringing back the remote workers because they're so lazy. And now that we've all been forced to work remotely using these digital tools, and tech generally, broadband and the tool sets were ready to rise to the challenge, thank goodness, we've now learned that was completely scapegoating, that the remote worker generally works longer, harder, and in fact is so focused that they're overdriving themselves. There's this fatigue concept entering in. So we've now unstigmatized that, and we've learned that the daily commute for an individual knowledge worker isn't necessary. If all I have to do is sit down at a desk and work and maybe have a call or a video chat with somebody and do individual work, there's no need for me to spend an hour going to the office, and there's no need for me to spend an hour coming back from the office. And then, you know what, if that's the majority of my work, there's no need for me to even live near the office. Now I can choose to live, where the grass is greener, or where the schools are better, or where I'm near family, as long as I'm near an airport and I can get to the office. And the office will now be hybridized in the future. I think the 30-70 layout we've had of, functional offices, where it was 70% workstations and offices and 30% rooms, that's going to flip completely, where we're going to need more of these. The office is going to be for collaboration. So that's one of the hybrid natures that I think is going forward. This concept of of working at home, I think, is going to bring out a whole plethora of products that are meant for, all right, and we were joking about it before. It's no longer going to be, the iPad and the earbuds. Okay, I can be on a call. How many hours and days can I be holding up my tablet and be on a call when I say, wait a minute, I'd like a big monitor, I'd like lighting, I'd like some things built for this. I think we're going to see a flood of products to grow that space so that the home office isn't somebody leaning across a kitchen table or struggling with something temporary, but it becomes a permanent place that actually saves enterprises money. They don't have to bring people in to the office. They don't have to pay for air conditioning and electricity and desk space and the rest of it. So how do you guys see these emerging hybrid sectors affecting both the technology space and culture, as we move around?
Yeah, well, David, I mean, you touched on a number of things, and that's really getting into the details of what I was describing earlier about in this season we've seen just so many we're seeing so many changes that will create lasting dynamics and impacts on society, business, culture, and so forth. And in these periods of economic downturn, and I think the health crisis has really doubled down on this dynamic, we tend to see innovation really accelerate and even bunch up. And as that innovation is unleashed on the economy, this is what ushers in new eras of technological change, cultural change, creates new business opportunities, and so forth. And that's what we're right in the thick of right now. As we start to lean into 2021 and hopefully put 2020 behind us, it's been a tough year all the way around. This is what we're talking about, and this is what levels up economies. This is what levels up society. And again, we're witnessing this, and the dynamic of work, the future of work. I mean, we're making a quantum leap here in work culture, and there's been a lot of thought put forward to this by some really smart people. But I think, yeah, you're going to see this dynamic of remote work. There's certainly going to be a remnant of this new American remote workforce that stays in place into 2021 and again after the crisis is over. And that's probably going to become a really competitive hiring dynamic for companies, is this ability to offer remote work. And to your point, it doesn't really matter where you are. And so businesses that are forward thinking in that way are probably going to capture more of the talent pool. But that's just the beginning of just how a lot of these cultural changes are going to take place as we hopefully push out of this crisis in the new year.
I think that I agree with both of you that hybrid is going to be the future because, right now you have, oh, yes, everybody's going to work from home. Oh, no, everybody's going to go back to the office. The reality is there are jobs that are hard to do from home and are better suited in an office and campus environment. And so these people will return. But I think for everybody else, the office changes in respect to the office is not where I work. The office is where I go purposely to, either collaborate with people or for specific tasks for which I might need a lab or access to specific technology and so forth. And the other part that I wrote a column for Fast Company on this topic is, remote work is not just about cost saving and flexibility and employee engagement. It's about diversity and inclusion too, because the idea that you can now hire in different locations, to your point, David, about working from where the grass is greener, or actually where the houses are not as expensive, is important. It's important to be able not to continue to focus around, Silicon Valley or Austin or the East Coast, especially, for technology, and be able to hire people where they're based so that they have a support network of, relatives that can help with the children and so forth. There are so many ramifications from a human perspective that remote work brings into the conversation that is really interesting. And then, if you transition and think about education for a second, that's the other aspect where hybrid could actually work. What if, it's not something as contagious as COVID, but is a simple, influenza, and my kid doesn't feel like it has to go to work, because even if to school, because even if they're home, they can connect to the class and keep up with what is being taught. I think that idea of having access to the school when there's a in Germany, it's a fry when it's too hot to go to school and they shut down. Here can be snow day, whatever the case might be. That doesn't mean that you shut everything off, because at the end of the day, schools and enterprises and consumer, we all invested in technology during these months. This is not going to be all thrown out. We're going to have to think about how we continue to use this technology that now we have in place.
And I think that also raises a very important corollary point, in that it's not just the beefing up of the hybrid technologies that allow us to be remote from the remote side, from our homes, from where we happen to be. It's the beefing up of the technology in what the new offices will be and the new schools will be to enable this. Any office that you're building with meeting spaces that doesn't equip every space in every room with the ability to handle these remote workers and bring them into the conversation is going to be a problem. Same thing with classrooms. You've got the price of some of the products, like the I don't want to pitch any company's particular product, but something like the Poly Studio USB, where you stick it in the room in a student's desk, and bingo, you've made that classroom, given it the capability of, and I'm sure there are other competitors' products as well. I don't want to get into that, but the idea is we now need to equip every classroom, every meeting room away from home to be able to work with this larger group of people that will now be choosing to either be remote full-time or choosing to be remote when they need to, as you point out. And I think that's going to change the dynamic in terms of the technology that's coming into this space. Certainly more for home technology, and certainly more for office, for education, for healthcare technology, to enable both sides of this digital transformation that's taken place. What's the joke that they said? 6 years of digital transformation in 6 months? And who is the leader of your digital transformation? Your CIO, your CEO, or COVID? It's these are the jokes that we've been seeing for the last few months, but they're true. We've had a lot of digital transformation.
Well, it's true, David. And one thing I just want to point out to viewers is also just the importance of connectivity to make all this stuff happen.
Yes.
So thank goodness 5G, we've got those networks building out at the moment, and timing couldn't be better for a new connectivity standard like 5G to really level up connectivity across the economy, thinking about digital transformation and automation and just the broadband requirements at home and so forth that we've struggled with. We've seen a growing demand for things like mesh networks in this season as one example, but 5G, I think as those networks propagate, it's right on time.
Yeah. And people
Yeah,
I know, and myself included, I've had to add new routers into my home, to pick up the capacity, so that everybody had a solid connection. It's what we've all been doing to try and increase this, and hopefully 5G will help when we get it more widely rolled out. Carlene, you wanted to make a point?
I just wanted to talk about how it's quite ironic that we're talking about a cellular technology coming to the aid of people that don't move around as much, but that was the problem that we've had because a lot of people live in congested area when it comes to Wi-Fi, and so mesh network can help with that, but people also turn to connected computers and using their phone as hotspots. And I do wonder if, as we talk about this hybrid work continuing, if from a corporate perspective, you will see a higher interest in equipping workers with cellular-enabled PCs for two reasons. One, to guarantee connectivity and not be dependent on, me growing in and screaming at my 12-year-old to stop gaming because I'm on a Zoom call, right? And I need the bandwidth. But also because in that way, they feel that they can protect that asset better versus them not, being sure of what kind of security I have on my home Wi-Fi. And this is one of the complexity that we've seen with working from home, is that blurring of, how far can IT get in my home before I feel that you're actually intruding in my personal space.
one of the things that I've talked about in some of my predictions that are coming out over the next couple of weeks is this idea of work-life balance giving way to what will then become, at least for knowledge workers, a work-life blend, where we're not going to be trying to figure out when one starts and one ends. There really isn't a difference. So as long as you're taking care of yourself personally, you may be working different hours, you may be doing different things. You're going to be measured by your output. So if you want to go with a child to a school during a day, or you want to go shopping or go on an errand, as long as you're doing your work and you're able to connect using remote tools, there's going to be this big mesh of people balancing it. Again, it's not for everyone and it's not for every job, but I think we are definitely going to see this blending of all of our life, where work becomes a part of who we are and what we do, not this cut off 9 to 5 chunk that's going through it, which again leads into what's my home technology versus my work technology versus my home space versus my workspace. It's going to be an interesting experiment. I've talked to a couple of people in the industry that we say we would if there wasn't so much death involved and so much pain, we'd love to have seen this as a social experiment, but unfortunately we're living through it as we do it, and we'll look back, I think, in 5 years and realize the tremendous revolution we went through then. It's kind of hard to grasp how big it is when you're living through it, but in retrospect, hopefully we'll get to that point. So anyway, one quick question.
I'm smiling because I should have patented the life blend, because I've been talking about it for the past 2 years, and more from I guess from a woman in tech perspective, where I think the idea, and also my previous life at Gartner and my passion for consumer within an enterprise environment has always got me to think about blend versus balance, because balance is about fight, right? It's a fight between two things that you're trying to find equilibrium. And as a woman in tech, that idea was dead to me about 10 years ago, because there's no balance, especially when you have children. But blend changes the dynamic of how you think about the tools you're using and the role that work and life plays, right? And you're the same human being, whether you're at home or you're in the office. And to your point, David, I think that what COVID has done is that they made us the same person because everything collided into one place. But the reality was that it was like this before. It's just that a lot of people were still striving for that balance and creating more friction than not trying to create a blend.
Totally agree. I'll have to send you the royalty checks after my article comes out. That's a great idea. And the interesting thing is, if you think back to collaboration, like what we're doing now, doing video, whether it's live, like we're recording it, or just in a conversation, having a pet jump up on your desk or having a child join you. We've made jokes about how difficult or how bad that was, anathema, and now we love it. And now it humanizes the experience because we're not getting that. We're not generally at an office, so we want to see your kids and we want to see your pets and we want to understand what's going on. So one more tech question before we go into the pivot, and I want to talk a little bit about CES. But I do want to call out, the difficulty we're dealing with, globally with this concept of supply chain. And I'll ask you, Steve, if you see, any of that impacting in your research. I know that things are harder to get because they're taking longer to make. I know that things are harder to get because even if they're made, they're needed faster, and we don't have the capacity to ship. So things are being shipped air freight, and they're more expensive. I mean, have you seen that as an impact or an overall drag on where we're going to be in technology, and at the holiday season and in the first quarter of next year? Will there be shortages, or what has your research shown?
Yeah, well, actually, the majority of disruption from a supply chain perspective happened really at the headwaters of the crisis back in that February, March timeframe, when lots of factories and suppliers were shutting down around the world, not just in Asia. But since then, what we're hearing from members is that I think a lot of those issues have been ironed out, and really the supply chain has largely recovered. Now, that's not to say that there haven't been spot shortages of components, and a lot of our members, especially SMEs in the manufacturing space, have gone so far as to make spot buys on different components to hedge against future disruption. But there's actually with that major disruption at the beginning of the year, that's triggered a lot of thought on kind of how to re-engineer supply chain. A lot of businesses using just-in-time strategies, and of course that that just did not work, and that really exposed, I think, a lot of vulnerabilities. So what we've been seeing through the lens of our research when we talk to members is that a lot of, and again, this is particularly true around SMEs, trying to shorten the supply chain. They're speaking and talking with their suppliers, factories, and so forth, all the stakeholders, in other words, of the supply chain a lot more frequently than they used to. I think there was somewhat of a fire and forget or just kind of trust and maybe verify in the past. Now that's not it at all. There's more conversations happening up and down across the supply chain. The other thing we're seeing is a lot more data sharing. So everybody's singing from the same hymnal. They're sharing data. They're basically working from a single source of truth. And another thing that's starting to happen relative to supply chain is stress testing. And so here, industry is taking a page from the banking industry in terms of stress tests on looking at different nodes in supply chain, time to recover if this node goes down, and then time to survive. So if the disruption happens, what's the maximum amount of time that we can fulfill demand before we run out of product or components or whatnot? And clearly, if your time to recover for a node is greater than your time to survive, then you've got a problem. You need a backup plan. So that's just a window into some of the thought and strategies that are currently working into and re-engineering supply chains. And what we're hearing again is really a lot of these things have been ironed out. Now, that's not to say that uncertainty doesn't exist. Of course it does. But I think generally, though, because we're seeing more conversations, there's more data sharing, I think that the impact of potential future disruptions would be a little less. That's barring a complete global shutdown like we saw earlier this year happening again. So I think supply chain is looking good.
Okay. I think one point that helped a little was with, I guess, is trying to find a silver lining in all of this, was the fact that diversification from a supply chain perspective started happening before COVID because of the U.S.-China economic and kind of political tension. And so you had seen vendors in the hardware side trying to diversify their supply chain and moving outside of China, and definitely not relying everything on one country specifically. And that helped a little bit, right, as well, that the fact that although China shut down first, people weren't entirely dependent on it.
Okay. All right. So you guys think it's in? Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna corroborate what Carolina was talking about. That's right. I mean, the tariffs that we saw here in this country relative to China and so forth, that was really the trigger point for a lot of brands, looking to diversify sourcing and so forth. There were notions of reshoring and so forth. We haven't really seen that happen in abundance, and what our members are telling us is that Asia in general still is a critical manufacturing center, and a lot of things that need to get done can only be done there in a number of reasons, for a number of reasons. But yes, it's true. The pieces are moving, but generally people are looking to shorten things while they diversify and stay in better touch with all the stakeholders across the supply chain.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys don't see it as difficult as I do. That's good news. I'm glad to hear that. Let me pivot now and talk about the calendar. It's November. Right around the next week or two, I would be seeing Steve, you or your team presenting CES Unveiled, at a small venue in New York City, and I would be moaning and complaining about how a $30 Las Vegas hotel room is being charged, $600 a night for my reservation at CES, and planning my trip and figuring out who I'm going to see and what press events I'm going to, and none of that's happening this year. That had to be a difficult decision for the CTA to look at this and say, look, even though we've done this so many years, so much time with so much success, and it's such a big part of what we do, we've got to do it differently this year. Can you give us any kind of insight without revealing anything you shouldn't about what went into that decision, and then we'll talk about what it's going to be like this year?
Sure, thanks, David. Yeah, it clearly was a very difficult decision to go all digital with CES 2021, but it was certainly the right decision. I mean, we made that decision towards the end of the summer, and that's when we hadn't seen a lot of these infection rates rise, but just clearly it just was not feasible to gather the magnitude of industry folk from around the world like we do each and every year in a normal season at CES these days. So we're encouraged by the news this week about the vaccine, and we are planning for a physical event in 2022, but 2021, yes, will be all digital. And let's face it, I mean, the technology that we've been talking about that's helped us stay productive, stay in school, and connect with family and friends, I mean, that same innovation really helped us reimagine CES 2021. And Microsoft is our partner. We had a press release about that a while ago. Fantastic, and so cool to have Microsoft back in the mix in a very, very big way. I mean, you guys have been attending CES for years and years, so you remember the Bill Gates keynotes, and Microsoft had their booth on the floor, and things changed over the years, but for CES 2021 and down the line, Microsoft is our partner. We're delighted to have them, and they're going to be supporting a lot of the platform elements, obviously the cloud elements and other support. But CES 2021, even though it's all digital, will still bring the typical value that it does in terms of connecting exhibitors, customers, thought leaders, media from around the world. I like to think of it as the World Cup of innovation. And I think because it's all digital, the irony is that we may see attendance of CES 2021 outstrip any previous physical show that we've had, because when you can attend online, I mean, you're given a front row seat to keynotes, and we know that's not always the case.
My feet hurt just hearing about standing online.
Yeah, so you're going to have a front row seat to a lot of things and access thereof more when it comes to different brands and the innovations that you're going to be able to see and connect with those exhibitors and brands. So I think it's going to be an amazing event, and I'm so looking forward to it.
I don't know if you are going to agree with me, Steve, but I also think that from a timing perspective, one of the changes that I've seen over the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years at CES is that we're talking about technologies just because of a technology curve that are going to take longer it's not, I'm coming to CES in January to see what's going to be in the store in June, right? Some of the technology curves are longer, and so a lot of it now at CES is about discussion, is about view of what is to come in the next 5 years, 10 years. And so in a way is easier to do that kind of event digitally than not if I really was using, CES to come and see the computer that is what is going to be on Best Buy, shelf 3 months down the line.
Yeah, Carolina, I'm so glad you noticed, and you're exactly correct, spot on. It's much more than just a gadget show. I think a long time ago, CES shed that mantle of just a gadget show. Of course, there's still hardware there in abundance, software, apps, a lot of content, services. But you're correct. There's also an abundance of discussion from global leaders. We've had so many different ministers, government ministers, and officials from around the world participate in CES, not to mention just the industry leaders vis-a-vis keynotes and other super sessions that we've had, a broader discussion on the impact of technology, how technology is helping solve some of the biggest problems our world faces, whether it's hunger, whether it's climate change, a lot of these issues. Technology is really at the vanguard or the salient for solutions to these big problems. And so it's been a fantastic forum to discuss this. And yes, I can almost guarantee you that there'll be a lot more of that with the all-digital CES 2021. And again, addition to the usual suspects in conversations about new big screen TVs that just stun and amaze, and then a lot of other innovations that we've seen through this season that are going to carry on and pay dividends. But also from a trends perspective, you're also right in that a lot of these are not just once a year or a 12-month trend. These are technology trends that play out over a long time series, and we've seen this, haven't we, time and time again. I mean, one example I often point to is XR technology, AR and VR. We've been talking about these things for a long time, and one of the things that CES is really good at is, of course, displaying organic innovation, but also displaying existing technologies that are being deployed for new use cases. And you put these two things together, and it's a hugely exciting event. It sets the pace right at the beginning of the year. It's what hundreds of thousands of people around the world look forward to, and there's so much coverage and media, it takes probably about a month to absorb it all, even when you attend. So it's going to be a fantastic event coming up soon in January.
I understand how, well, nobody understands, but I can envision how it will be attending terrific conversations and terrific presentations remotely. How do I envision what it will be like cruising up and down the halls and seeing what various vendors are doing? Are you working on some type of a digital avatar platform or something like that with your Microsoft partner that will let people sort of walk around and explore?
That's something, to my knowledge, that we're not doing, in fact. I think we're really focusing more on the substance and the content. There'll be mechanisms that we're working with Microsoft on that will allow attendees and certainly media to engage with different brands, and that's what I meant by having really that front row seat. So in some ways, it's going to be even better. We've all known what it's like trying. You go to a brand's booth at the show, and you're like, okay, can I talk to somebody about this? And they're like, oh, well, he's in a meeting, or he's doing this, and so forth. So hopefully it'll be even easier to get answers, to connect directly with brands. I think it's going to be a really good thing. And again, I think this is also going to remain a fixture as we move forward. Again, our plans for 2022 are for a physical event in Las Vegas that will be paired with a virtual event in case people can't attend or that's their preference.
Okay, that's great. And you and I have had a couple of conversations over the years about this idea of how much physical floor space in Las Vegas and in a conference center is being taken up by exhibitors with concepts. You'd have, two football field size displays about somebody that's talking about something that you can't really actually touch. And it becomes, it's unwieldy. There's this dichotomy of what's a product show and what's a concept show, and it's kind of hard to separate the two. Has there been any conversation around, using this as a stepping stone to perhaps get a little bit more differentiation between products and concepts going forward, so it's easier to consume both instead of having them in each other's face?
Well, actually, I think a lot of people endorse that differentiation, and that's what really constitutes the rich tapestry of a technology narrative that we see each and every year at CES. I mean, there are some big statements at CES, and then there are some very small booths, and this is our product. And we, like I said before, we still see an awful lot of hardware. I mean, hardware is still, I think, kind of the anchor point of the show. But then we also have more conceptual things. A lot of tech today, let's face it, is thinking about hardware and devices, a collection of sensors and some processors, and then beyond that, it's mostly software defined. So having said that, there's just a lot of hardware innovation, but there's also a lot of bigger ideas. I mean, take smart cities, for example. There's a lot of different moving parts within that, but CES is able to convey a lot of these topics, the importance of tech and brand marketing as another angle. And that's why we're seeing so many different brands. We like to say that every company is a technology company these days. And it's really true because every brand is leveraging technology in one way or another, where it's marketing or actually engineering products themselves. Brands like L'Oreal is one example. Or John Deere, another fantastic exhibitor in recent years. Technology is spreading out across the broader economy and is touching every facet of the economy. So I think, therefore, it's only organic and natural that we have that kind of, I'll use your word again, hybrid of a lot of gadgets and stuff, and then a lot of more conceptual type things that are really thought-provoking and are addressing some of the world's biggest problems.
Well, I'll agree with 99% of what you say, although I'll still have a little bit of a be taken aback by an automotive manufacturer that builds a booth so big that they build a kitchen into it, yet there's no cars in the booth. So I think that's I don't know if that's the statement that I would be making, and I don't know if that's the statement that any company is going to be making post-COVID. But for now, I find that just kind of gets in the way of me seeing things because I'm physically trying to get past the kitchen and the four-bedroom suite and the big conceptual booth. But
So you,
so
you
anyway,
should
that's
have made the decision not to go to the show floor. That's what I did last year. I did not make it to the show floor because the the value and the number of the smaller vendors that are at the Sands and the International Expo is just so great. Obviously, we're very privileged, right? We get pre-briefed by all the large brands that tend to spend, their money in the larger space of a show floor, and then you have all these smaller players that don't have that kind of budget, but have extremely interesting concepts and products. And that's where I spent all of my time last year. And, it's been kind of transitioning. The year before, I think I spent probably about a couple of hours at the convention center. And, I spent a lot of time talking to European companies just because of my heritage. And, they have this little tiny booth and a lot of
sure.
brand share, mind share, and hope.
Well, we should, you've read, I'm sure you've seen the books about theme parks that give you strategies for attending the theme parks. We should actually produce a book about the strategies for attending CES. I've been for more than a dozen years now, maybe close to 20 at this point. And I would say probably about 10 years ago, I gave up on the concept of seeing the show, which killed me. It literally it pained me to know that I would never see all of it. But unless I'm bringing a team of 10 or 20 or 30 people and we're
Absolutely.
dividing it up, we're never going to see the whole thing. So yes, I do get most of my knowledge from the press briefings before the show even opens. And Steve's briefing, but I find the need to wander around the convention center and the Sands is critical. And I'll give you one small example of that. A year ago, literally a year ago, we were looking at large manufacturers' audio systems, wireless earbuds in the neighborhood of $200 each and $300 each. And at some of these small booths, I was seeing examples of $30, $20 true wireless earbuds that sounded good. And what I took away from that was this is a market whose pricing is collapsing. There's
Yep.
there's price value for the brand name, but there isn't price value for the product. And just like anything else I learn, or most anything else I learn at CES, within 12 to 18 months you see that hit the market. And just today on Walmart's Black Friday page, you're seeing true wireless earbuds for $14. And other ones for just under $25. So I wouldn't have figured out that trend unless I saw 14, 15 little companies with their products and put it together in my mind. But we all do the shows differently, and hopefully together we aggregate an image of what's going on. And Steve, you must be chuckling because that's exactly what you want, right?
I am chuckling, and that is exactly what we want. Yes.
There you go. So I'll give each of you last thoughts, and then we can wrap up this conversation for today. Last thoughts on CES, on technology, on hybrid, on where we are. Carolina, why don't you go first? I let Steve go first last time.
I think one big takeaway for me that I hope will come through because of a hybrid world is one that enterprises are going to start treating employees as consumers. And what I mean by that is that they're going to start to care about experience, not just about, what I give you to work, but I want to give you something that makes it easier for you to get the job done.
And provide some choice, right? And let
Providing
people have.
choicing, paying attention to ease of use and quality and all these beautiful things that from a consumer brand perspective you care about. I think that hybrid model will also kind of force that to happen because in the home, I will have choices. And, if you're thinking about a mic, even a headset, right? If you have someone that is pitching an enterprise headset, well, you need to really have to convince me what the value of that enterprise headset is versus, AirPods as an example. So that idea of, style and you started to see that, not to just mention Poly, but, in the new speaker lineup that Poly just introduced a couple of weeks ago, the fabric, the attention to the design, because these things are now in my home, not just in the office. And so I want that. So I think that blend that we were talking about from a user perspective also will happen on the product side. From a event perspective, what I'm hoping is that to Steve's point earlier about attendance is that these events will be broader and will help more people, get the knowledge and get familiar with technology. So a little bit of an equalizer, if you like, versus only the people that could afford to, fly and pay $600 for a hotel in Vegas. And I think that's interesting. And not forget as well that digital events allow you to reach people that speak different languages as well, right? So having translations for keynotes and things like that, yes, happen to some extent live, but, all of this is going to be so much easier for so many people. And I think that's just a good thing all around.
Terrific. Great thoughts, Carolina. I agree with all of them. Thank you. Now, Steve, I want to get your closing thoughts as well. But before I do that, one question that I thought that I should ask you, and I think it's a fair question. If you don't want to answer it, you want to punt till later, that's fine. But do you think that this home office, that this remote worker segment could clearly be a segment that emerges as one of the key pieces of CES 2022? Is this something you guys are kind of keeping an eye on?
Absolutely, we're keeping an eye on it, and I think more broadly, the whole idea of Soho, which was a phenomenon back in the '90s when we had desktop printing and and the first home routers and stuff showed up at CompUSA, if you remember that retailer. We're seeing a renaissance in Soho right now, and clearly, you said it before, David, that there's going to be a lot of opportunity here. We're seeing that unfold now. CES is no doubt going to bring even more innovation and opportunity, and just describe how that change is going to manifest into the new year.
Okay, so what are your that's great. I appreciate that, and I know an expert or a couple of them who might want to be involved in helping you guys get that track going next year. So what are your closing thoughts on this discussion about where we are in technology and the hybrid world and CES virtual coming up in 2022 later on? Give you the last word.
Well, thanks. Yeah, well, let me just close with an invitation to CES 2021. Registration begins on December 1st, so pretty quickly now. So just mark your calendars to go and register for CES 2021 on December 1st, and you can get that done. And then, like we've established on this discussion today, this webinar, just so much innovation, digital transformation, just such a historically high level of demand for technology all through this season. It's carrying over into the holiday season now. It's going to spill over into 2021. And where can we go to find out what's next? Well, it's CES 21, clearly. And that's going to be early in the year, right? January 11th through 14th. Is when CES will take place. So it's about.
I love the later date. Please talk to Karen and see if we can make that stick going forward. So it's a little further away from New Year's. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it does take a little bit of the pressure off, doesn't it? But 11th through 14th are the show dates. And so, I just want to welcome everybody and invite them to register on December 1st for CES 2021. We'll see you there.
Carolina, again, thank you. How would people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about you and what you do?
The easiest way is to find me on Twitter. I'm at Caro, CARO _ Milanesi, MILANESI. If you get me there, you can get me everywhere.
Carolina, thank you very much. And Steve, if somebody wants to find out more about you or get in touch with you or the CTA, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, first, if you'd like to connect with our thinking at CTA Research, you can do that at cta.tech, that's TECH/research, so cta.tech/research. And if you'd like to connect with me personally, my email address is just skoenig@cta.tech. I look forward to hearing from you.
Carolina, Steve, thank you very much. This is a great conversation. So for AVNation TV and for the IMCCA, I'm David Danto. You guys know you can Google me. I have a million emails all over the place. And I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode. Thanks very much.